Nobody inside that courtroom was ready for what happened next. Not the reporters packed into the benches, not the lawyers flipping through their files, and definitely not T himself. Because the moment the judge delivered those words, the entire atmosphere changed in an instant. It wasn't just a sentence. It was the kind of ruling that freezes a room mid-breath. People later described it as the second everything shifted from routine legal proceedings into something far heavier, something that felt final. Even those who had followed the case from the beginning said they weren't prepared for how extreme it sounded when it was actually spoken out loud. And right there in the middle of it, T, someone who has built his entire identity around control, authority, and staying composed under pressure, was suddenly stripped of all of it in real time. According to multiple people inside the courtroom, there was a brief silence right after the sentence landed. Not the normal kind of silence, but the kind where nobody moves because nobody is sure what happens next. Then came the reaction. And it wasn't what people expected. T didn't break down quietly. He didn't sit in shock. Instead, those who were present say his reaction came fast, sharp, and visibly intense. His expression changed immediately, and the energy in the room reportedly shifted again, this time into something more chaotic. One witness described it as the moment the situation stopped feeling controlled. Security reportedly tensed up almost instantly. Lawyers leaned in. Even the judge's expression, according to some accounts, remained firm but aware that the temperature in the room had just spiked. Because at that point, it wasn't just about a legal outcome anymore. It was about a man realizing, in real time, that the situation he thought he understood had just taken a turn he couldn't redirect. And that's where things start to get even more complicated. T has never been viewed as someone who handles pressure passively. Throughout his career, he's built a reputation as someone strategic, careful with words, careful with image, always aware of how situations are perceived. That's part of why this moment hit so differently. It didn't look like someone losing a case. It looked like someone losing control of a system they believed they understood. In the days leading up to the sentencing, things were already tense behind the scenes. Sources close to the situation described a growing sense of uncertainty inside his legal circle. Meetings ran late into the night. Conversations reportedly shifted between confidence and concern. There was preparation, but also hesitation. Some believed the outcome would be serious, but not extreme. Others felt there was still room for things to lean in a more manageable direction. That assumption, according to insiders, played a major role in how unprepared people felt when the final decision actually landed. Because when reality didn't match expectations, the shock didn't just register, it hit hard. And that shock didn't stay contained in the courtroom. Within minutes, word started spreading outside. Reporters began updating feeds. Social media started reacting in real time. But what stood out most wasn't just the news itself, it was the tone. People weren't just surprised. They were questioning how things escalated to that level. Inside the courtroom, however, the moment was still unfolding. After T's initial reaction, tension reportedly didn't ease, it intensified. Some accounts suggest there were brief exchanges between legal teams and court officials as things were being brought back under control. Security presence, according to multiple observers, became more noticeable. Eventually, order was restored, but the atmosphere never fully returned to normal. Something had shifted permanently. And that's what people can't stop talking about now. Not just the sentence, but the reaction. Because it revealed something deeper than the case itself. It exposed how quickly control can disappear when the stakes are personal, public, and irreversible all at once. Outside the courtroom, speculation exploded immediately. Some people focused on the severity of the ruling. Others focused entirely on T's response, dissecting every detail of what he might have been thinking in that moment. A few even questioned whether anyone involved truly anticipated an outcome like this at all. But the truth is, the real story might not even be the sentence. It might be what happened mentally in that exact moment, when expectation collided with reality. Because according to those who were there, T didn't look confused. He didn't look lost. He looked like someone processing something in real time, fast, intense, and deeply personal. And that's what makes this situation feel bigger than just a courtroom ruling. It's not just about what was decided. It's about how quickly everything changed when the decision was finally spoken out loud. Now the internet is doing WH. And it always does, breaking it down, analyzing every angle, turning every second into theory. But inside that room, it wasn't theory. It was real, immediate, unfiltered. And even though the court has moved on to procedure and formality, the moment itself is already stuck in people's minds. Because once a situation reaches that level of intensity, it doesn't just end when the judge leaves the bench. It follows everyone out of the room. And right now, the biggest question isn't what the sentence was. It's what that moment actually did to everyone involved, especially the man who, for the first time in a long time, didn't seem in control at all. The courtroom was already tense before anything even started. According to multiple accounts, the atmosphere that day felt unusually heavy, like everyone in the room could sense something irreversible was about to unfold. Reporters were locked in, cameras ready, lawyers flipping through files they probably didn't even need to look at anymore. Even the observers in the back weren't whispering like usual. They were watching, waiting. And then there was T. On the surface, he looked composed, controlled, the kind of stillness that people often mistake for confidence. But insiders later claimed it wasn't that simple. One described his energy as too controlled, like someone actively holding themselves together rather than naturally calm. Whether that's accurate or just hindsight interpretation, no one can say for sure. But it added to the feeling that something underneath the surface was already unsettled. Then the judge began speaking. At first, it sounded procedural, standard language, the kind of formal buildup that usually leads to expected outcomes. But that didn't last long, because as the words continued, the tone in the room began to shift. Subtle at first, a slight change in posture here, a quiet breath there. Then it became undeniable. Something was different. People who were there say you could feel the realization spreading across the room in waves, like everyone was slowly understanding, at the same time, that this wasn't going the way they had predicted. And then the sentence landed. Not softened, not unclear, final. For a split second, everything stopped. No whispers, no movement, no reaction from the crowd, just silence so thick it felt physical. And in that silence, all attention shifted to T. Everyone was watching him, waiting to see what kind of reaction would come next. Would he stay calm? Would he respond emotionally? Would he say anything at all? For a brief moment, it looked like he might hold it together. But then something changed. According to people inside the courtroom, it wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle, a shift in posture, a change in facial expression, the kind of moment where you can almost see someone's internal processing catch up to reality. And then it hit. The weight of the sentence didn't just register, it crashed in. What followed, according to multiple accounts, was a reaction that no one fully expected from someone known for control. T didn't stay still. He didn't quietly absorb it. The energy in the room reportedly shifted again, this time into something more volatile. Security tensed immediately. Lawyers looked up. People in the room began reacting not to the ruling anymore, but to him. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't staying contained. Some witnesses describe it as a sudden emotional break in composure. Others say it was more like disbelief turning into confrontation. Either way, it disrupted the courtroom enough that officials had to step in quickly to stabilize the situation. But what made it even more intense was that it didn't feel like a simple outburst. It felt layered. One insider described it as watching someone realize the outcome wasn't just bad, it was final in a way they hadn't prepared for. That distinction matters because it explains why the reaction didn't come out as quiet resignation. It came out as pressure release. And once that happened, the courtroom dynamic changed completely. The focus was no longer just on the sentence. It was on the reaction to it. Every detail suddenly mattered. Every movement was being interpreted. Every second was being mentally replayed by those who were there. Then came the conflicting accounts. Some say T stood up immediately, visibly shaken, speaking directly toward the court in a way that suggested disbelief rather than acceptance. Others claim the reaction started physically first, a sudden movement that caused security to step closer before any clear words were even heard. And then there are the more viral versions, the ones spreading online fastest, claiming he openly questioned the fairness of what had just happened. One widely circulated account alleges he said something along the lines of not understanding how the decision could be made so decisively in that way. Whether the exact wording is accurate or not, the broader detail is consistent across almost every version. He lost composure, and that alone became the turning point. Because in a courtroom setting, reactions matter almost as much as rulings. Once control breaks, perception shifts instantly. And that's exactly what happened here. Security reportedly moved closer. Officials tried to restore order. Voices were raised. The situation, for a brief moment, felt like it was on the edge of spiraling further. Then something else happened. As things were being brought under control, new claims began surfacing almost immediately. Claims that T's reaction didn't stop at emotion, that it moved into something closer to accusation, that he suggested, indirectly or otherwise, that the outcome had been predetermined. That idea, whether true or not, changed everything about how the story spread outside the courtroom. Because now it wasn't just about a sentence. It became about legitimacy. Within minutes, the narrative outside exploded. Phones lit up. Messages spread. Reporters rushed to confirm details. Social media filled the gaps with speculation, theories, and increasingly dramatic interpretations of what had happened inside. And in situations like this, once a narrative starts moving, it rarely slows down. What makes this moment so heavily discussed isn't just the legal outcome. It's the collision of expectation and reality inside a high-pressure space where control matters more than almost anything else. T walked in, expected to manage the situation. But according to everyone present, the situation managed him instead. And now the aftermath isn't just about what was decided in court. It's about what happened when that decision was spoken out loud, and how quickly everything inside that room stopped being procedural and started becoming something nobody there will forget. The moment T was escorted out of the courtroom, everything stopped being contained. Within minutes, whatever had happened inside didn't stay inside. It spilled out into the internet in fragments, half-heard explanations, shaky phone recordings, and conflicting eyewitness accounts that all painted slightly different versions of the same explosive moment. But before social media even had time to properly process it, the narrative had already formed. T explodes in courtroom. Outburst shocks everyone. Security forced to intervene. Headlines appeared almost instantly, even though the full facts were still unclear. That's how fast things moved. The story didn't wait for confirmation, it built itself in real time. And the public ran with it. Clips were analyzed frame by frame. Comment sections filled with theories. People debated what was real, what was exaggerated, and what was completely misunderstood. But while everyone focused on the visible chaos, something else, something quieter, was being discussed behind the scenes. According to one alleged insider, there was a moment during the breakdown that most people missed entirely. A brief pause in the middle of the reaction. Not dramatic, not obvious, but enough to change the tone of what was happening. They claim T suddenly stopped mid-outburst. Not fully calm, not fully composed, but frozen for a split second, like something had caught his attention. And then he looked. Not at the judge, not at the jury, at someone else in the room. The identity of that person hasn't been confirmed, but the way it's described makes it sound intentional, like a direct acknowledgement, not a random glance. And according to the same source, his expression shifted in that moment. The anger wasn't gone, but it changed shape. It became focused, controlled in a different way, sharper. Then came the line. Quiet, barely audible. This ain't over. That's it, no explanation, no context, just a statement that, if true, adds an entirely new layer to everything that just happened. Because that doesn't sound like emotional reaction. It sounds like continuation. And that's where things start getting heavier. Once T was removed from the courtroom, the immediate chaos began to settle, but only on the surface. Behind it, the real ripple effect was just starting. People inside reportedly didn't talk openly at first. Instead, there were side conversations, whispered reactions, and subtle exchanges between legal teams, observers, and staff trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Because the reaction didn't match what most people expected from a sentencing hearing. It didn't feel like acceptance. It felt like resistance. And that distinction changed everything. As the footage and accounts spread online, a second narrative started forming, less focused on T himself and more focused on the decision that triggered the reaction. Was the sentence expected to be that severe? Was there something in the case that led to a sudden shift at the final moment? Or was this exactly what was always going to happen, but just not believed until it actually did? Those questions started spreading almost as fast as the original story. And once people started questioning the outcome, the situation stopped being just about one courtroom moment. It became something broader, something about fairness, about pressure, and about what actually happened behind closed doors leading up to that decision. Then came the next layer of speculation. Because according to early whispers circulating online, there may have been last-minute developments inside the hearing that were never fully explained. Things that weren't made public. Information that may have influenced the final decision in ways the outside world didn't see. Nothing confirmed, no official details, just enough uncertainty to keep the speculation growing. And that uncertainty made the entire situation feel unstable. Because if the outcome wasn't as straightforward as it looked, then everything, including the reaction, takes on a different meaning. But the real explosion didn't happen inside the courtroom. It happened after. As T exited, the first wave of unofficial clips started surfacing. Not professional recordings, those weren't allowed, but phone videos, audio snippets, and fragmented eyewitness breakdowns that painted a much more chaotic exit than anyone expected. Some said he had to be physically guided out. Others claimed he was still speaking, still reacting, still visibly overwhelmed even after the hearing ended. And then came the most controversial claims, that his final words before leaving weren't directed at the court at all, but at someone specific in the room. That detail alone sent the internet into overdrive. Because now people weren't just replaying the sentence anymore. They were trying to identify the exact moment everything snapped, and who it was directed at. Within hours, the story had fully escaped courtroom boundaries and turned into a viral phenomenon. TikTok edits, Twitter threads, YouTube breakdowns, each one adding another layer, another interpretation, another theory. One phrase began trending repeatedly across platforms. Insane courtroom moment. But even that wasn't the end of it. Behind the scenes, things were moving fast. Sources claim T's team immediately began working to control the narrative. Legal conversations, coordinated responses, and urgent discussions about how to address what was now a rapidly spreading public story. Not just the sentence, but the reaction. Because reactions like that don't disappear on their own, they follow the story. And then, just when it seemed like everything was stabilizing, another detail surfaced that shifted attention again, suggesting that what people saw in the courtroom might not have been the full version of events at all. And that's where the situation stops feeling like a single moment and starts feeling like a chain reaction. Because now, the question isn't just what happened in court. It's what happened before it, and what hasn't been shown yet. And just like that, YouTube turned the situation into non-stop content. Every hour, a new breakdown appeared, every thumbnail more dramatic than the last. Courtroom meltdown, T sentence explained. What they're hiding, flashing across screens everywhere. And the more people watched, the less clear everything became. Because every creator had a different version. Every insider had a new detail. Every thread added another layer of confusion. And instead of answers, the internet got noise. Loud, fast, and unstoppable noise. But behind all that chaos, something more serious was happening. Because according to multiple claims floating around legal discussion spaces online, the courtroom moment wasn't just about emotion. It was about timing. And timing, in this case, became everything. People started pointing out something strange. Why did the sentence feel so sudden? Why did it escalate so quickly? And why did T's reaction look less like surprise and more like realization? That question changed the direction of the entire conversation. Now it wasn't just what happened. It became, what did he already know? And that's where things started getting darker. Because a new wave of unverified reports began suggesting that there were conversations before the sentencing that never made it into public record. Side discussions, legal back and forth that didn't fully surface in official summaries. Nothing confirmed, but enough to make people question the gap between what was said publicly and what was allegedly discussed privately. And in that gap, theories started growing. Meanwhile, social media didn't slow down. If anything, it sped up even more. Clips were being slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame. People were replaying T's reaction over and over again, trying to catch something others missed. A facial expression, a word, a shift in posture, anything that could explain why that moment hit so hard. And that's when another detail started spreading. A supposed audio fragment from outside the courtroom. Not official, not verified, but widely shared. In it, faint voices could be heard discussing the aftermath. Nothing fully clear, but one phrase stood out and kept getting repeated across posts. He didn't expect that outcome. That single line reignited everything. Because didn't expect implies assumption. And assumption implies prior understanding. So now people weren't just questioning the sentence. They were questioning the entire lead-up. Back inside the narrative storm, attention turned again to T's camp. Not directly, not officially, but through silence. And silence online always becomes its own language. No statement. No clarification. No public response. Just quiet. And that quiet started to feel heavier than any headline. Because when someone known for control and presence suddenly disappears from the conversation, people don't assume peace. They assume planning. And that's exactly what the internet started doing. He's building a case. He's being advised. He's waiting. He's not done. Every theory pulled the story further away from reality and deeper into speculation. Then came another twist. A screenshot began circulating from an anonymous account, No profile history, no followers, just one post before it vanished. You only saw the reaction, not what caused it. It was gone within minutes. But screenshots don't disappear. And that was enough to send everything spiraling again. Now the focus wasn't just on T anymore. It expanded outward. People started questioning everyone around the situation. Who was present? Who had access? Who might have known more than they were saying? And slowly, the story stopped being about one courtroom moment. It turned into a network of questions with no clear center. Why was the energy in the room described so differently by different people? Why did some call it routine while others called it unstable? And why did every account seem to agree on one thing only? The shift happened instantly when the sentence was read. That instant shift became the anchor of the entire story. Because something about it didn't sit right with people. And the more it was repeated, the more it sounded like a turning point no one was prepared for. Meanwhile, reactions from public figures, carefully worded, indirect, and cautious, only added more fuel. Nobody named names directly, but their phrasing was enough. Comments like, "Not everything is meant to be public," or "There's always context people don't see." They weren't answers. They were signals, and audiences treated them like clues. At this point, even casual observers were getting pulled in, not because they understood the situation, but because they felt the scale of it expanding. Every refresh brought something new. Every hour added another angle. Then came the moment that shifted everything again. A legal commentary thread started gaining traction, suggesting that sentencing outcomes can sometimes involve last-minute considerations that don't always make it into public-facing summaries. Not specific to this case, just general procedure talk, but people immediately attached meaning to it. Suddenly, every detail felt suspicious. Every gap felt intentional. Every silence felt strategic. And that's when the internet reached its breaking point of speculation. Because once people start believing there are missing pieces, they stop trusting what they already have. And that's exactly what happened here. The narrative fractured completely. And that's where the real divide started. Because it wasn't just about the case anymore. It became about expectations. How fast people demand answers. How quickly silence gets judged. And how celebrities are forced into reacting even when everything around them is still legally sensitive. Then came the next wave. A few high-profile voices, people who usually avoid controversy, started dropping indirect comments, not naming anyone but clearly referring to the situation. One post read, "This isn't over, it's the beginning of something longer." That single line changed the tone instantly. Because beginning implies continuation, and continuation means more is coming. Suddenly, the internet wasn't focused on what happened anymore. It was waiting for what happens next. Appeals, reactions, new evidence, a response from T, or maybe something no one had even considered yet. And that uncertainty made everything feel heavier. Then, just when things felt like they had peaked, the story shifted again. Late that night, a new claim started circulating across forums and social platforms. Talk of a sealed document connected to the case. Not released, not verified, just mentioned. But that was enough. Because once people heard the word sealed, imagination did the rest. What's in it? Why isn't it public? Who has access? Theories exploded instantly. Some claimed it contained evidence that supported the court's decision. Others insisted it pointed in a completely different direction, one that could explain T's reaction inside the courtroom. And just like that, both sides the internet felt validated. One side said, "See, there's more we don't know. The sentence makes sense." The other fired back. "Exactly, there's hidden information. that means something's off. No agreement, no middle ground, just conflict. But the most important shift came next. Because alongside the sealed document rumors, another claim began spreading quietly, then louder, then everywhere. According to unverified sources, T's legal team wasn't just reacting anymore. They were preparing something bigger. Not just an appeal, but a structured legal response aimed at challenging parts of the outcome and potentially introducing new information into the public space. And even though nothing was confirmed, that idea alone changed the atmosphere again. Now, the story wasn't just about what had already happened. It was about what was being prepared behind the scenes. And suddenly, T's silence started to look different. Not empty, strategic. Because when someone stops reacting publicly, but everything around them is still moving legally, that silence doesn't feel like confusion anymore. It feels like planning. And that made people rethink everything. Was the courtroom reaction just emotion? Or was it triggered by something deeper that hasn't been revealed yet? Was the sentence the full picture? Or just one piece of a larger structure nobody sees yet? The questions kept stacking up, and the answers still weren't coming. Meanwhile, the internet didn't slow down. If anything, it accelerated. Every hour brought new breakdowns, new insider posts, new clips, new interpretations, but nothing concrete. Just noise layered over more noise. And in the middle of all that, one pattern became obvious. The less official information there was, the more theories grew. Because silence creates space, and the internet always fills space. Then came the final wave of uncertainty. A brief post from an anonymous account appeared and disappeared just as fast. It said only this: "You saw the reaction, you don't know the reason." No name, no proof, no follow-up. But it didn't need any. Because by then, people were already deep in speculation mode. And that one line was enough to restart everything again. Now the situation feels stuck in a loop. No clarity, no closure, only build-up. And that's why it still feels unfinished. Because every time the story slows down, something else pulls it right back into motion. So now the real questions remain. What's actually in that sealed file, if it exists? What is T's team preparing behind the scenes? And if new information ever does come out, will it confirm what people believe? Or completely rewrite the entire story again? Because one thing is certain. This isn't a closed chapter. It's still unfolding. And whatever comes next might not just add to the story. It might completely change it.